With CM Punk seemingly on his way out of All Elite Wrestling, what are the chances of a WWE return? Well, according to one report, one influential member of WWE's hierarchy would vote no to a Punk return. We've got full details on that. Plus, Bray Wyatt recently returned to WWE. We've got an update on his role. Is he a babyface or a heel? And his merchandise numbers since returning to the company at Extreme Rules. WWE and GCW. Is there a working relationship? What's going on there? Elimination Chamber will not take place in Saudi Arabia next year. We'll let you know where the pay-per-view is set to take place. Bron Breakker, why isn't he a Steiner? And SmackDown, an upcoming episode, will it be pre-taped? Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestling News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well. As always, there are plenty of news stories to get into in the world of World Wrestling Entertainment. And let's start off talking about a possible return for CM Punk. Could it happen? Realistically, so much has happened already this year. Now, a Punk return to WWE wouldn't happen until 2023. Of course, he's out of action for roughly 9 months due to a torn triceps he suffered at All Out just a couple of months ago. But with one foot out of the door of All Elite Wrestling, could this pave the way for the former WWE champion to return to the company he walked out of back in January of 2014. Well, this is a fascinating story, isn't it? Everything about CM Punk at the moment is absolutely fascinating, and an influential WWE name reportedly would vote no to a CM Punk return to the company. As previously reported, All Elite Wrestling and CM Punk are in talks over a buyout of his contract for the former AEW World Champion to leave the company. The only holdup on the buyout is a non-compete clause that would prevent Punk from jumping to WWE if the company wants him to return and if Punk is open to returning to the company. During a recent PW Torch audio show, Wade Keller discussed some of the issues between Punk and All Elite Wrestling right now on the possibility of Punk returning to WWE. This is what Keller had to say, quote, "As I talked about this fall, Paul Levesque is more likely to bring Punk back than Vince McMahon would have been, not less." That doesn't mean Paul Levesque was a fan of CM Punk, but Paul Levesque is in a different position than Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon never believed in CM Punk, and therefore, in the way he pushed Punk, never fully got behind him. Paul Levesque, while he thinks Punk personality-wise might be more trouble than he's worth, has shown a history of recognizing wrestlers who are over with today's fans that he might himself not have predicted would be over. Now, Keller continued on to bring up an influential name in the company and why they would be a hard no to Punk coming back to WWE. Quote, "Somebody who's currently in WWE and is within the sphere of influence of Paul Levesque's decision-making would be a hard no as of me asking this person today. A hard no on endorsing the return of CM Punk, even if it would help business. I won't go into exactly what was said, but when I asked, I got a long paragraph of one sentence after another of negative comments about how they feel about Punk now compared to 8, 9, 10 years ago, based on what's happened in AEW in the last 13 months. And by the way, related to this, I talked to 3 people of significant stature in AEW in the last couple of days. I asked how would a vote go in the AEW locker room if they were asked if they wanted Punk to return. One person said he wouldn't fare very well. Another person said he thinks he might not get a single vote. And someone else says he doesn't think he'd get many votes at all. I think he'd get some personally, just based on the conversation I've had in the last 6 weeks with others. The 3 people I talked to in the last few days are higher, prominent people of influence in that locker room. So that tells you something about his standing and why I think if Punk were to return, it wouldn't necessarily go well for him in either place. And I think that falls into the calculation of Tony Khan right now. And it might fall into the calculation of Paul Levesque. I still believe Levesque would be more likely to bring him in than Vince McMahon for the reasons I said, but I think there would be some pushback by some people in Levesque's sphere of influence. Now, that's a really interesting point there that Wade Keller has made. I don't see any way back for CM Punk in AEW at this point. CM Punk's actively in negotiations about departure from the company. The fact that there is this ongoing hold-up, there is this blockade, as it were, about a potential non-compete clause, I think shows CM Punk's desire to wrestle once again. I don't think this is the last time we have seen CM Punk inside of a wrestling ring. Now, you could say, is it just because CM Punk is not going to appear, I don't think anyway, for Freddie Prinze Jr.'s, new promotion, whatever that may be. I don't think CM Punk's going to wrestle for Impact. I don't think CM Punk's going to wrestle for MLW because by all intents and purposes, the amount of money that CM Punk is asking for and its high asking price can only be matched by WWE and AEW. New Japan Pro Wrestling isn't totally off the books, whilst they wouldn't be able to afford CM Punk's asking price. If CM Punk does effectively negotiate a financially lucrative buyout, then maybe that could reduce his asking price somewhat, and maybe he could go to Japan, maybe he could work the G1, maybe he could go and headline a Tokyo Dome show. That isn't completely out of the realm of possibility, but one thing you could say is that New Japan Pro Wrestling is an international partner of AEW. How would that go down? That gets somewhat complicated there. So again, it becomes difficult. I wouldn't rule out a WWE return. The only reason I wouldn't rule out a WWE return is just because it's naive to think that that is impossible. Because nothing is impossible anymore. Nothing is impossible with pro wrestling. 2022 is the greatest example of just when you think something will never happen or it's not going to happen for years, it happens. I always use the example. Stone Cold Steve Austin came back and wrestled a match for the first time in nearly 20 years in the main event of WrestleMania this year, and it's not even the top 10 stories of the year. That's because so much has gone on, whether it comes to Vince McMahon's retirement, Triple H Levesque retiring, Cody Rhodes returning to WWE. I mean, we could go on and on. CM Punk, all of that drama in AEW. There's just been so much. So you can't rule out anything at this stage. And as Wade Keller notes, and I think he's right, that CM Punk returning, I found it was more likely under Vince McMahon, because Vince McMahon's got a history of bringing people back that he's fallen out with, but also so does Triple H. Triple H facilitated the returns to WWE of Bruno Sammartino, who was staunchly against WWE for years. He mended the fences between Vince McMahon and the Ultimate Warrior. Obviously, Hulk Hogan came back to WWE and he helped facilitate that as well. So there are many names that have been persona non grata that have returned to WWE and that have been facilitated by Triple H over the year. So CM Punk could be just as likely as any of those names. And as has been reported by numerous outlets at this stage, if Triple H feels like it's best for business, that's not just a catchphrase for him, it's real. If he feels like it's best for business and he can put a deal together, and bear in mind, whilst Triple H might not be the co-CEO of the company like Stephanie McMahon and Nick Khan is, he's essentially running the show there. He's the public face of WWE right now. He controls contracts for talent. He's the head of talent relations. So any contract, any return deal that CM Punk would have would go through Triple H. He would put that deal together. And on top of that, he's also booking the television. He's arguably the most powerful man in the company right now because he controls and dictates what we see every single week on TV. And he dictates and controls what people get paid. He signs off on that. He puts those deals together. So if Triple H wanted CM Punk to return to the company, he can make that happen. He can cut the deal and he can put together the creative for that to happen there. As far as is it going to happen? Well, it's not going to happen this year. And again, this whole conversation about a possible CM Punk return is somewhat of a moot point because it's not going to happen anytime soon. First of all, CM Punk is still under contract to AEW and he's still suspended and he's still negotiating his departure. It might be a case of CM Punk has to back down to get the money that he feels like and contractually is owed from AEW. So he might have to have this non-compete clause anyway. And either way, he can't wrestle for 9 months because of his torn tricep. So we're not talking about a CM Punk return to WWE, even if there is no non-compete until, at the very least, maybe the summer of next year, the summer of Punk in WWE once again. Could you imagine? So any WWE return would be some way off. I think, looking at it, and obviously, look, CM Punk has been incredibly problematic in recent months for AEW. There's no doubt about that. But you could argue that CM Punk would be entering a more stable company in WWE than AEW. There is a corporate structure there. I know he had his challenges working in that corporate environment, working in that a million different writers and butting heads with Vince McMahon. But by all accounts, the process has changed somewhat. Yes, it's very structured. And yes, you still got a million producers, but there is an element of flexibility, once again, in WWE that maybe wasn't there previously. And those issues that he had in AEW about maybe a lack of control or people leaking things, etc., that has somewhat changed in WWE. So maybe that would be the better environment for him right now. And I don't suspect he comes in and works 5 nights a week on and live events for WWE. I think that's impossible. I don't even know if he works every TV if he comes in. But I just think that there is unfinished business for him there. I do, and I wouldn't rule it out. I think that we saw the impact of having Cody Rhodes go from AEW to WWE earlier this year. Of course, Punk's a different situation, but if you can sign someone that the last time he was on AEW TV was in the main event of one of their biggest pay-per-views of the year and was the AEW World Champion, it's still a big deal. And there still is unfinished business. That story of CM Punk in WWE hasn't been told yet, that final chapter. So, I don't know. I wouldn't, at this stage, if in 9 months' time or whenever, if he comes back, or maybe even in a year or so, or 18 months or so, I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked. At this stage, I wouldn't be shocked, realistically. And it will depend how this non-compete clause goes. It will depend on certain aspects of the future, but I don't think we're in the position to rule out anything anymore when it comes to pro wrestling. So CM Punk returning to WWE, wouldn't be shocked in the slightest. Let's talk about Bray Wyatt. Speaking of returns, Bray Wyatt, of course, recently returned to WWE. And we've got some really interesting details about just how popular Bray Wyatt is right now. According to Mike Johnson via PW Insider, WWE has internally slotted Bray Wyatt as the top babyface for the SmackDown brand. Drew McIntyre is currently slotted as second on that list. WWE has been absolutely thrilled with the rollout of the Wyatt return, as he's been the company's top merchandise seller in recent weeks. There are plans to roll out additional Wyatt merchandise, including plush versions of the Firefly Funhouse characters. The company is especially happy with the buzz from all of the interactive White Rabbit material leading to Bray's return, and will be looking to do similar content in future storylines, even for others beyond Bray Wyatt, if and when the time is right and if it fits a storyline. There were a number of people who pushed for such content in the past, but it was never authorized under the old regime. But until Paul Levesque vision for creative, that has now changed, of course. Now, obviously, people are talking about the QR code this week and all that kind of stuff. If you do want to have all of the details, all of the Easter eggs, all of the cryptic teasers from Friday's QR code and the psych reports and all that kind of stuff, and lyrics to David Bowie and Nirvana songs, check it out. It's on the channel. You can go check that out there. But I think it's really fascinating. There are certainly so many different aspects of that report that are fascinating. One being Bray Wyatt's listed as a babyface. So any of this idea that he was going to be a heel, in retrospect, has he come across as a heel in the last 2 weeks or so since he's been back? I don't necessarily think so. Certainly the Uncle Howdy mask, that's what we're calling it, but there's sort of two Uncle Howdys now. But the new mask came across as very heelish, didn't he? I mean, he's talking about, you don't know what you're dealing with, etc., etc., and it feels menacing. It's got the red contact eyes, but the Bray Wyatt character, this version, the Wyndham character, as it were, as he mentioned, I've played so many different versions of myself in the past, but this is just me. I'm only going to be just me. I'm just going to be just Bray. When he came out on SmackDown for his return to the show, that was a babyface promo. Last week on SmackDown, backstage, he hinted that along the way I'm going to do terrible, awful things, but it's the way the circle dictates. That felt a bit more heelish, certainly, didn't it? But it's difficult because he's really popular. And I suppose it's just a case of he can still, I always say this about heels, he can still be a heel. As long as he's facing heel opponents, he'll be a babyface. So it would appear right now he's slotted to be a babyface. There's still so many questions and intangibles about this Bray Wyatt character, and the Wyatt Six and Uncle Howdy and that character that ended the vignettes with the hat saying Howdy. All of that stuff. We still have no idea where this is going. And that's a good thing. Now, as far as the merchandise, that shouldn't come as a shock whatsoever. That was the most shocking thing about Bray Wyatt being fired from WWE last year, is that he was one of the top merchandise movers in the WWE. This is a guy that made the company so much money when it came to merchandise because he was perfect. He had so many different characters in his Firefly Funhouse. Even that set, that is a toy set waiting to be made. In that Firefly Funhouse, you've got 4 or 5 different characters. They've all can be made into puppets, all this kind of stuff. The Fiend is a perfect Halloween character, perfect scary character. Then you've got the Bray Wyatt character in itself. You've got the gloves, you've got the mask. I mean, it was just, again, it's a license to print money. He always made so much money for WWE and so much money off merch. So it shouldn't come as much as of a surprise that him coming back to the company, suddenly he's selling so much merch once again. But also it's an indicator of a really successful rollout of the White Rabbit tees and the White Rabbit project. And again, WWE's no fool. Their merchandise department is no fool. They're bringing back the Firefly Funhouse characters. As far as if we're going to see the Funhouse return, I don't know. But it doesn't matter because they can make money off it. So Well, the interesting thing, of course, will be, is he going to be the highest merchandise mover in 6 months? Obviously, he's going to sell a ton of merchandise since his return because he's the biggest return so far of all of these names that have returned to the company. Again, what will be interesting is in 6 months' time, are we going to see the same level of excitement, the same level of intrigue about the new version of Bray Wyatt and the new characters, etc., etc. So keep an eye out for that. And once we get numbers, of course, we'll talk about it here on the channel. These rumors about WWE and GCW, we touched on these last night, but we've got an update about them. This comes from Fightful Select. Sean Ross Sapp, Sean Ross Sapp certainly has, inquired with GCW about whether or not there was an answer about WWE and GCW and WWE going on Fight TV Plus, because a lot of independent promotions have reached deals with Fight Plus about an extended deal. For those that have asked, Sean Ross Sapp did ask GCW about rumors of a WWE partnership. They were given a statement that indicated they'd announced their streaming plans on November 1st. WWE wouldn't deny it, but in a rep, they said they're in favor of people telling other people to watch WWE Raw. All signs point to this being an apparently very effective rib or joke. Joey Janela simply said he couldn't say anything when they asked, but they'd been given no indication that two sides were actually working together. As I've said a million times before, I would be really, really surprised to find out that WWE had a working relationship with GCW. GCW, the company, has a ton of stigma attached to them, whether it's deserved or not, they do. And I think at this rate, WWE doesn't play ball with anyone. They just don't. Unless it's all one-way traffic and WWE start getting your talent. WWE had working relationships with people in the UK, and some of those companies don't exist anymore. So I know that was under the old regime and things could change, but I'd be very, very surprised if WWE had a working relationship with GCW. I think it's a GCW thing that is just getting them attention, and that's what they're good at. Elimination Chamber, a bit of an update on Elimination Chamber. Of course, many expected the show to take place in Saudi Arabia next February, but that's not the case. Elimination Chamber is coming to Canada. WWE announced that WWE Elimination Chamber will be held on February 18, 2023. The events will emanate from the Bell Center in Montreal. This marks the first premium live event in Montreal since Breaking Point 2009. Of course, Elimination Chamber is headlined by the Elimination Chamber bout. The last Elimination Chamber event took place on February 19 of this year in Saudi Arabia. So certainly it's interesting that that event isn't going to be in Saudi Arabia, and that could suggest that the Saudi pay-per-view may have been moved. Usually they have 2 per year, one in November. It's always Crown Jewel. Now they had this one this year in February, but in the past, when the first Saudi event happened, it was just after WrestleMania. It was the Greatest Royal Rumble. It was in April. So we could be looking at a situation maybe where 2023's Saudi pay-per-views take place in April, May, and the other one takes place in that traditional slot of around Halloween time, sort of late October, early November. But I'm really happy to see that event come to Montreal. Of course, classic wrestling city, very infamous wrestling city, and for whatever reason, they just don't really do pay-per-views there. And as it has been spoken about recently, I'm glad to see that these towns and these shows, I mean, Elimination Chamber, I hope that they were going to move away from all of the gimmick pay-per-views. But at this stage, WWE doesn't have to worry about where the event is anymore, realistically, for these kind of B-level or these lower tier shows, because they've already got the money from Peacock, so they don't have to worry of, if I put the event on in Montreal, is it going to draw, or is it going to do a good number on in terms of pay-per-view buys? No, the model and the format has changed. So I'm excited to see what happens with that show in February. Bron Breakker, he's not a Steiner, and we have an update as to why. Shawn Michaels has explained why NXT champion Bron Breakker doesn't use the Steiner name on WWE TV. Shawn Michaels, speaking to comicbook.com, explained the logic behind giving Bron a new name. He said, quote, "I think Bron is going to be incredibly successful no matter what you want to call him. He's a very bright, talented, unbelievably wonderful young man. I'll say this, I think now he's established Bron Breakker pretty darn well. Let's put it this way, what we wanted to make sure that we did in NXT is not run from or pretend like it wasn't there. And I think that's what has helped him. I think that's made the transition into a new name and character a bit easier." Talking about the importance of establishing Bron Breakker as his own entity whilst also paying respect to the legacy of the Steiners in wrestling, Shawn explained, quote, "We didn't pretend like it wasn't there and he wasn't a Steiner by bringing his father out and making reference to who he was and where he came from. I think that's made it a little bit easier." Now, it must be said, I think Shawn Michaels is being slightly economical with the truth there, because if the Steiners, particularly Scott Steiners, but in general, if the Steiners were on good terms with WWE when Bron Breakker made his debut, he would be Bron Steiner right now, or he would be that's what he would be. He would be Bronson Steiner, whatever it may be. That's what he would be. When he made his debut, there was strict instructions. Do not reference him as a Steiner. Do not reference his father. Do not reference his uncle, because Scott Steiner at the time had nuclear heat with WWE. And Vince McMahon was still in charge, and he said, no, don't reference him as a Steiner. We're not doing that. And a couple of months later, they sort of went, wow, everyone knows he's a Steiner anyway, so start saying his dad's Rick Steiner. And then a couple months later, Scott Steiner goes in the Hall of Fame, and now they're happy to talk about his Steiner heritage. Just change his name. What's the point? So Shawn Michaels has been a bit economical with the truth there, must be said. Finally, of course, we spoke yesterday actually about SmackDown possibly being pre-taped. Do you have an update on that? It looks like an upcoming episode of Friday Night SmackDown will be scheduled to air pre-taped rather than live. Of course, WWE heads to Saudi Arabia on Saturday, November 5th for Crown Jewel, which means it will be taking place less than a day after the November 4th episode of SmackDown. While no official announcements have been made about the upcoming pre-tape show, WWE's events page does not list a live SmackDown for November 4, which means it's very likely that the October 28th show will feature a double taping. The usual live airing of SmackDown and then another episode will air the following week on November 4. WWE employed this strategy just over a month ago when they headed to the UK for Clash at the Castle, so it wouldn't be really anything out of the ordinary. Of course, the October 28th episode of SmackDown will air on FS1 instead of Fox, but there's been no confirmation as of yet that the November 4 episode will be the same. Of course, we'll keep you updated once we get any information on that. So there you go. There you go, guys. That's the latest WWE news for you. Be sure to smash the like and the like button. Be sure to subscribe bottom right-hand corner. Let me know your thoughts on today's WWE news stories in the comment section below, and I'll speak with you again very, very soon.
Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.